Hello and welcome to Lightspeed, where we discuss music and music production related topics. My name is Sunwarper.
I'm Kh3rtis.
I'm Eonlake.
And I'm Hydrofyter.
Yeah,
That's right. Today we've got two guests on, our friends Eonlake and Hydrofyter, and we're talking about recording and mixing synths.
There are many ways to mix synths and to layer synths, and there are many ways in which you can get the sound in which you want to do. There's no right and wrong. But we thought we'd get a couple of our buddies on here to talk about how they do it, and hopefully it can provide some inspiration for you guys back home.
Yeah, so Hydrofyter, why don't you start with what you do?
Yeah, let me share my screen with you guys.
Perfect.
Okay, so here's an example of where I grouped two leads on a track. So I've got what is an Oddity, which is a ripoff of the ARP Odyssey, and I've got a Prophet plugin that are both using the same track. So I have the same sequence. This will trigger both sounds from both synthesizers. And then I've got certain things mapped to my instrument rack so I can control these with my hardware when I want to mix in real time type of thing. So let's just take a peek and see how I've got like this Prophet mapped out here. It looks like I've got a filter cutoff, I've got a filter envelope, and I've got the envelope filter on here. And then I also have the volumes for each one of those synthesizers set up here. So I can play with all of this stuff in real time when I'm doing my mix type of thing. So let's just say, for instance, if I just wanted to hear what the ARP is doing, let me kill all of these here. Then I can blend in. And balance between the two. And a lot of times I'll play with these effects in real time then too.
And are you mapping those to like a hardware, like MIDI knob or something? Or are you just doing mouse?
I use an APC40 when I'm doing my mixes.
Right.
And the APC40 really just links up automatically with what these instrument racks are. So it's really easy to use like that. So do you want to see how I build the group on that?
Yeah, let's do it.
So let's just create a new track here. You just basically just drag and drop these things in here. And then I would create a group here. Expand this out, and if I wanted to add the Prophet on top of that, just drag and drop that in there.
So to what extent, so you fiddle with them separately, and then the idea is that you're just basically blending them into one.
Yeah, so I've gone through a lot of my synths. So let's just say I wanted to have, let me close this out again here. And let's just configure which items from the synth I want to have added in there for the Prophet. If I want to have the cutoff added here, it'll grab it there, it'll grab it there. So when I close this out, I've got everything here. And then you just right click and you map to the macro.
Very cool. And now, do you do any sort of panning for the synths, or are those just straight on in the center or something like that?
A lot of times I don't necessarily do panning, but what I do is I've got an audio effect where I've got a delay that spreads out spreads it out. So I could spread out the synth so it's expanding across the stereo field more. Mm-hmm. But I don't really typically pan hard left or pan hard right. You can if you want, but I think if I did that, I'd probably have two separate tracks and I'd have two different sequences going on with that.
Yeah, see, that's kind of like what I do. So when I have like a rhythm pad or, a pad, something like that, I like to put it. I got it from guitar and from like early 90s guitar type production. As a guitar player, I had to incorporate it. So I'll put like 4 synths throughout the stereo spectrum, and then I'll have the same chords on them, but I'll do different inversions of the chords. So it kind of sounds like it's being played differently, but mostly the same. and that gives it like a chorusy type sound and a really wide, strong sound.
Well, I was just thinking the good thing about doing this with instrument racks and virtual instruments is you can save that rack out if you've got a particular favorite stack of legendary synthesizers panned certain ways with certain controls mapped.
That's exactly what I do. So I don't really tweak with a lot of the settings. I go through my synths. I find the filters that I want to play with. And then I grab those different racks and pull them out, or different instruments, pull them in, and then I might map these a little bit different depending on how I'm racking them out. But that's exactly what I do, depending on what the song is. You know, I try to build limitations around what I can do, because then I'll forget how much stuff I want to do in a song. So if I don't have those limitations, I'm not going to get to some of the things that I want to do. Not to mention, I'm kind of limited by the hardware in a way too.
It's one of those. If you've got this, I mean, I suppose it's good to have some form of limitation. Otherwise, I mean, paralysis analysis kicks in before you know it. You're not getting anywhere. You know?
Then all the songs end up sounding the same too.
Yeah.
You're using the same ideas on everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always feel like limitation brings out creativity, because you have to work around it rather than having just endless, I can do this and this. It's just, you keep going. Like you were saying, it's just trial and error. Whereas if you have a limitation, you can just build off of it and work around it.
I tend to do something similar, but I tend to record a lot of the changes on the instrument racks. I'm a push user myself, so I like to fiddle around with things while they're playing and that. So I tend to do a pass through songs so that I can, once I've got the structure, so that I can make sure that the sounds evolve where they're supposed to. But it made me think of a big change that I made to my workflow as far as mixing is concerned. And that was, as a trained engineer, I used to reset and mix separately all the time. And sometimes to the extent of doing analog summing, where I bounce out through the mixer and then back in to get some more analog tone to it. And what I found was the mixes, although they sounded quite good, they just seemed to lose something that was there when I was tracking and when I was building these sounds, and when one sound led on to something else. And it just didn't have the same feel. It sounded technically okay, but it just seemed to lose something, some X element. So what I started to do then was I would mix as I went, and I would record all my automation, and I do that so that then I can do the same thing with the hardware synths that I can't automate. Some of them I can, some of them I can't. And I would do a mix that was basically the sum of all the tracking and editing and so on. And at the end, I would mix it down. I've always got an instrument rack like that to do mid-side compression on the whole mix as well, because I like to compress the center channel and leave the edges so you don't hear it pump so much.
Interesting.
And then I'd strip everything, and then I'd do the full sort of, start from scratch, build it piece by piece. What's the important part, work it around that. And what I found was every single time, the as I was going mix was better than the subsequent, from zero mix every single time. And I didn't want to believe it because it kind of went against what I believed as an engineer, but it's just better. So now I've dropped the mixing it separately completely. My output's gone up a fair bit as well as a result. But yeah, I don't bother, mixing from scratch anymore. Sometimes I'll zero again halfway through tracking and so on if it all starts to get a little bit out of control and you've got to race towards the top. But otherwise, I find it kind of evolves as I do it anyway.
Now, when you say mixing, do you mean just like volume automation or even EQ, things like getting things to sit together better and things like that?
Yeah, it's a bit of everything. I mean, again, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist in the sense that I think you should start with the sound. When I was recording traditional instruments, it was always get a good sound, capture that sound, control the sound, and then balance it. That was how you would do it. If you wanted it to sound good, it needed to start sounding good. So with synths, when you're tracking them, you kind of need to think about how things are going to fit together, especially if, like me, you've got some analog mono synths that have got some really heavy tone in them. Because one of the things I love doing, I've got a Moog Sub 37, which I love the sound of. I like recording it over and over again to build pads out of a really fat monosynth sound. But you have to be very careful with things like that because it's such an unnaturally thick sound that you can swamp out your whole mix and you can take out any space that you're trying to create. So you have to be very careful about building layers and where they're going to sit as far as how far back they are and how up and down the sort of register they are. And sometimes you do need to EQ them round each other a little bit so that they don't just gang up in certain frequency ranges and create great big peaks.
Are you taking those mono synths and putting them into a sampler and building a
polyphonic
synth?
I'll play a part that's like one note of a chord each time, and then record it again with the next note of the chord and so on, and stack them up that way.
That's the Boards of Canada way.
Yeah,
right. They've said they like to do it that way because it's never going to be performed the exact same way, and so just those slight alterations and variations give it a thicker sound.
Yeah,
it allows you to be more flexible in what you're doing. I like the idea of, like, again, splitting up if you're doing a triad, splitting up the 135. You have them on separate tracks, and then what you can do is not only can you play with them separately, but then you can move them around differently. Quite the opposite of Steve. I quite enjoy the whole auto panning and just letting things kind of weave out and weave as they go. So if you split a triad into 3, for example, you can pan them slightly ever so around the head, and then you can auto pan them for different layers and different lengths. And then what you do is you've got that chord just spinning around your head as you go through, and that kind of drives through the whole. I'll add a pad underneath, something like that, as a driving factor, almost like a comet going through space kind of thing. So thank you very much for tuning in. We will be back again in 2 weeks' time, where we will be discussing some other things, but before then we have an exciting announcement to make.
Yes, we are happy to announce that Howard Eonlake is the newest member of our Audionautic network. He will be hosting an upcoming podcast of ours, Starstream, that will be part of our new Patreon.
Yeah, so the inaugural episode is the 24th of July. It's a longer form, the three of us chatting about news, gear, plugins, anything else that comes up, anything else that people have been requesting in the community and so on. So hope to see you there.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks, but in the interim, if you want to check out our playlist, you can find it on Spotify, where it's things that we're listening to lately, influenced by, and submissions from our radio.
Speaking of which, if you would like to have a song play on our radio, maybe you've got a new EP or a new single out, drop us an email or a DM, audionauticsounds@gmail.com. We love your tracks and love playing them.
See you next time.